Is it possible to be more discouraged after watching the film review of the Bearcats win at SMU?
Our Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Here we go. Thank you very much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. We're free and available everywhere you get your podcast and on YouTube. Subscribe to our Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel. Follow us too to get an alert every time we drop a new episode. Today's episode, as you see on your screen, is brought to you by LinkedIn. I'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, so I watched the film review. I rewatched the game. And I feel, if it's possible, and I feel more discouraged about this team after rewatching the game than I did after the game aired live on Saturday. Or I should say it was played live on Saturday. Are you kidding me? With some of the things I saw and some of the things I heard Mark Jones, who I really like as a play-by-play commentator, and RG3, some of the things they were saying were mocking the Bearcats. They were mocking the Bearcats. They were mocking the two-time reigning conference champions and a program coming off a college football playoff appearance. A program that Luke Fickell says the next step is for this program to be a top 10 program. And you had the commentating team, who, by the way, is doing the game this weekend at UCF, mocking the Bearcats on air. How embarrassing. How embarrassing for a team that had 4 false starts, 6 drop passes. 4 false starts, 6 drop passes. And by the way, Cincinnati, according to Mark Jones and RG3, had a football field's worth. So 100 yards of personal foul penalties. Personal foul penalties. Penalties that are inexcusable and very, very preventable. Like, what the heck? This is a team, okay, and I'm really starting to question what this team's identity is. And I know that might raise some eyebrows because we hear all the time that this program wants to be driven through the offensive and defensive lines. Okay, so they have an identity. But what is this team's identity in particular? What is this team in particular their identity? Well, they stop the run. Okay, that's great. They run the ball. All right, that's fine. They play hard. That's good. I mean, every team should play hard. Almost too hard. So what that identity is, it's good complementary football. You stop the run, you run the ball, that's good. But what's not is that's it. That is this team's identity right now. That's it. It's very one-dimensional. They're not dynamic. They are susceptible still to big plays. And right now, the worst part about this is they're boring. The Cincinnati Bearcats right now are a boring football team to watch. What do they do that excites you? They haven't hit a big play in several weeks, except for Charles McClellan's 76-yard touchdown run, which, yes, is a big play. But when you think of big plays, do you think about, and I don't know, this is why I'm asking you, do you think about big runs, or do you like those over-the-top passes, 80 yards, like Burrow to Chase or Burrow to Boyd? We haven't seen many of that from this Bearcats team since the Indiana game. We haven't seen that. Because right now, this offense is lacking so much creativity. And you know what's funny to me? You know what's really interesting to me? Is the play that closed out the game, right? The 3rd and 9 conversion by Josh Whyle. Simple RPO, rollout, tight end, boom, first down, game over. Why wasn't that used earlier in the game? Why was that not used? Okay. Why was that not used earlier in the season? You have the best tight end tandem in the country, and yet they aren't much of a factor in games. You look at their season totals right now, and I'm going to talk to you on Friday. I'm going to tease Friday's episode a little bit. I'm going to talk to you on Friday about why Josh Whyle and Leonard Taylor desperately need to be involved in the game plan at Central Florida. Right now, Leonard Taylor, 13 catches, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. Josh Whyle, 19 catches, 192 yards, 2 touchdowns. Neither of them have over 200 yards. Wiley's 4th on the team receiving, Taylor's 6th. Neither of them have over 20 catches. Then again, only 2 do, Trey Tucker and Tyler Scott. But they have got to be more involved. Why is it that all of a sudden when Mike Denbrock, you never thought I'd say his name again, maybe you didn't, maybe you did. So when Mike Denbrock leaves Cincinnati because he was the offensive coordinator and the tight ends coach, and Gino Guidugli takes over, the tight ends just simply aren't involved in the game plan? That is a little questionable to me. Like, Gino Guidugli has to understand, this offense is not last year's, or 2020 for that matter. Gino Guidugli doesn't have Desmond Ridder, Alec Pierce, Jerome Ford to call plays with. He has Ben Bryant and an offense that, let's be honest, is not nearly as good as last year's. It's not. So this offense reminds me more of 2019. Well, what did 2019's offense look like? Run-centric, tight ends, heavily used. Josiah DeGuara was the best receiver on the team. You want to know why that is? Because Mike Denbrock was driven through. Mike Denbrock was a tight end, has a tight end background. Okay? So, what that means is this program that has produced tight ends out the wazoos, going all the way back to Travis Kelce. You have 2 coming into the season who were NFL caliber prospects. And yet on Saturday, it was like they weren't even a part of the game plan. For whatever reason. Like, how do you not incorporate them into your game plan when A, you don't have Tyler Scott, so that probably indicates you're not going to be able to throw deep, and B, when the defense knows you're going to run the football, and they know that they aren't very good at stopping the run, but it's still a priority for them. So what does that mean? Shouldn't you use your tight ends to pick up those yards? Like on 3rd and 3, there was a 3rd and 3 at one point in the game when the Bearcats decided to put extra linemen on the line and run Corey Kiner. Well, why aren't you in that situation putting Taylor and Whyle on each side and running an RPO? Fake the handoff to Kiner, get Whyle and Taylor out in space. I said that that's what they should have done in the Cotton Bowl as far as the game planning, and they sure as heck should have done that on Saturday against SMU. Because dadgummit, this offense is getting hard to watch. This offense that I said, or asked the question to you all, and maybe you thought this. I asked you all, could this offense outscore last year's offense? It sure as heck isn't going to if they continue to play like this. Back-to-back games under 30 points, and really 3 straight because the defense got 7 at Tulsa, which means the offense only got 24. This offense simply is not good enough, right? To watch the Bearcats right now, you have commentators mocking them, and this is the team that's 6-1. Mark Jones compared the Bearcats playing an 11 o'clock game to a 10 o'clock flag football game that he said he used to play at his old TV station with his coworkers the day after New Year's. That's funny to hear it. But when you have commentators mocking your team, and this happened during the Arkansas game. So if it happened on Saturday and it happened in Arkansas, what do you think is going to happen in Central Florida? In the biggest game of the year, in a game that Luke Fickell says is the continuation of a rivalry. Luke Fickell said this yesterday at his press conference, that Luke Fickell says is going to be a rivalry going into the Big 12. I will tell you right now, UCF is disciplined. They do not commit a lot of penalties. Cincinnati does. And by the way, UCF knows what's happened the last 3 times they've played, since the last 3 times these two teams have met. Blowout in Cincinnati last year, and the previous 2 meetings were decided by 3 points. Cincinnati has to get better. If it's possible for me to be more discouraged after watching the film, rewatching the game, it is. And I don't like feeling that way. But this team is simply not playing like a team that's going to win out and go 12-1. This team is playing like a team that might go 9-3, which means they finish 9-3. They're 6-1 right now. That means they would finish 3-2. Not great. And not something we're used to seeing from the Cincinnati Bearcats. The good that I saw from the film, I think the back shoulder throws to Jaden Thompson work. I really do. The 34-yard back shoulder throw to Jaden Thompson in the second quarter, gorgeous throw by Brian. Tough throw to make. It was long. It had to be placed perfectly, and it was. So give Ben Bryant credit for that, and give Jaden Thompson credit for his elite athleticism. All right, coming up, if we compare this team to last year's, I've got 2 examples that supports that claim. I'll get into that after a word from, let's see what the sponsor is for this first live read. Oh, got it. After a word from LinkedIn, as you see on your screen. You see, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because they help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. I've been through this before when I was hiring for my sports staff at Bearcats Media. I used LinkedIn. I looked at everybody's resumes, and that's what led to our sports staff at Bearcats Media being so successful. And it's so easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs. You do it, you add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. It's simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. LinkedIn Jobs. I talk about it all the time. Bearcats Media, when I built that staff, we finished every year strong. The right team member, absolutely. We started from scratch, but we had so many staff members that were just willing to do the right thing, willing to put in the work, and willing to just, be a part of a team. That's what's so important. And that's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, thanks for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Alex Frank with you, your host each and every day here on Locked On Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I am of I have said, and I am someone who thinks this team is very similar to last year's team, but not because they're as good as last year's team, the Bearcats this year. It's because of games 7 through 8 last year. And if you remember those games, they went to Navy and went to Tulane, right? 2 games that you as a fan may not be excited about, but certainly they matter. Every game matters. So the game against Navy last year was the 7th game of the season. No, it was the 8th game of the season. Was it? No. It was the 7th. Yeah, it was the 7th. Sorry. 7th game of the season. And Cincinnati goes in. Navy's 1-5. They win by 7. And that was the first really close game of the season where everybody started to kind of get a little anxious. Well, is this team going to be able to go to the college football playoffs? Is this team doing enough? Is the weight of expectations and the stress getting to them, the stress of staying undefeated getting to them. And I remember talking with Jason Williams that night on 700 WLW. Jason Williams, sports columnist at the Cincinnati Enquirer. And I remember saying to him, these games are going to happen. It's just the human element of sports, right? Navy plays such a unique style. We'll see them next week. That a 7-point win in Navy should still be viewed as good and should not be held against them because of the style Navy plays. Well, sure enough, then the next week the Bearcats go to Tulane, and I thought, okay, this will, you have one game where you barely win. You'll play better the next game. You'll blow them out. Well, they beat Tulane 31-12. Mo Egger took the stance of 19-point win on the road is very good. And I was like, yes, I agreed. But to watch the Bearcats play that game, I believe they were outgained in total yards. Like, that was just not a good performance. And those two games gave you that uneasy feeling of, well, is this team going to have done enough in the season to make the playoff? And I said, and this year, what's interesting to me is games 7 through 8 are 2 straight road games. Once again, much bigger games at SMU and UCF, and those games are on ESPN. But this team's margin for error last year was still very slim. They were still a group of 5 team. They were still because of that, a group of 5 team trying to make the college football playoff, a team that was living on a razor-thin margin with even loftier expectations if they wanted to be in the playoff. Undefeated season, win convincingly, have teams lose around you. They had to have more things happen than any other average team would, okay? So, to me, this year's team is like that, except they're playing with a razor-thin margin to go to a New Year's Six Bowl. It looks like to me, and Justin Williams highlighted this in The Athletic, maybe it's true, maybe they're just struggling right now, I don't know. But I do know that 3 straight conference wins by a combined 16 points is not going to cut it, right? 10-point win at Tulsa, 4-point win over South Florida, and then a 2-point win over SMU. Not going to cut it. Even for a team that is less talented, compared to last year's team. Even for a team that doesn't have the alpha dogs that last year's team had in Desmond Ridder, Sauce Gardner, etc. This team is still really talented. Ivan Pace can be an alpha dog. In fact, he already might be. They have a solid offense, an offensive line that's doing a good job for the most part. They have a strong receiving group. They have 2 tight ends who are NFL caliber, and yet it still looks like it's so hard to watch this team play. The margin for error is slim for this team to go to a New Year's Six Bowl. If they lose one more game, they could still go, but the chances are very slim. They'd have to win out than the rest of the way. When you're a less talented team and you're dealing with a razor-thin margin for error, which is not anything that you did to yourself, it's an indictment of playing in the American Athletic Conference, and you have the expectations of doing very similar to what you did last year. right? When you have that and you have those expectations, sometimes they can start to weigh on you a little bit. And maybe that's what's happening to this team. But it's been happening since the second half against Indiana. And the same team that showed up for those 30 minutes is the same team we've seen the last 3 weeks on a consistent basis. And it has got to get better if this team wants to still achieve what it wants to achieve. But right now, and the worst part for me is, right now I'm watching this team play. I'm not seeing them play with the tough, nasty, physical, we own you culture that they played with for the last 2 years. I'm not seeing any of that. What I'm seeing is a team that right now is undisciplined, that right now just thinks that just thinks because they're the Bearcats, they're going to walk out on the field and win. And you know what? Maybe they'll get a taste of some humble pie against UCF this week. Because UCF just got their own taste of humble pie. They lost by 21 to ECU. Gus Malzahn's going to have that team ready to play on Saturday. He knows Cincinnati, this game is their season. This game against Cincinnati is UCF season. Period. Tulane, yes. Okay. But I'm not buying into what Tulane is doing. I've already kind of dipped into my third segment in this segment. But I'm just saying, this team right now is not playing with the fire and passion that I saw in the first 3.5 games of the season and all of last year and all of 2020. I'm not seeing it right now. I'm not. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's lack of leadership. I don't know if it's, they just are looking to the Big 12. I don't know if it's they just think they're better than everybody so they don't have to do as much. I don't know. But what I'm seeing right now is a team that is not playing with that same fire and passion. It's hard to watch. You feel like, as a Bearcats fan, when you watch a game, that you are, I don't want to say wasting 4 hours of your time. I'm certainly not doing this Daily Bearcats podcast. But it kind of feels like you want to do other things while watching the game. Like when the Bearcats play a Navy in 2 weeks, that's either going to be a 3:30 or 4 o'clock game. I'm very interested to know how many of you wish you could be watching Tennessee and Georgia, or maybe you're just going to say, you know what, I'm going to watch Tennessee and Georgia as it is. Because Tennessee and Georgia play at the same time in 2 weeks. How many of you, if you're going to watch the Bearcats game against Navy, are going to wish you were watching Tennessee and Georgia? How many of you are going to look forward to Clemson, Notre Dame, or Alabama, LSU later that night? Because right now, watching the Bearcats is boring. It is. This team does not do a lot of things well. Sure, they stop the run. Sure, they run the ball well. Sure, they play hard. That's great. I say they play hard, but they're not playing with the fire and passion and discipline. Last year's Bearcats team was okay in terms of penalties. This year, they're not. It's like they're reckless. The lay hit out of bounds by Ty Van Fossen ripping the helmet off the SMU running back. I mean, that's just discipline. Just know not to do that. Right? That's what I think about. Okay? This team right now is not fun to watch. And I asked you all last week, could covering a good team or watching a good team be boring? The answer is now more than looking like a yes. Because it can be. Sure, this team is winning, so they're good, and that'll keep you interested and want to watch. But what do they do that's interesting? What do they do that excites you? All right, coming up, more on if the expectations are getting to this year's team, but I got to tell you first about a new product here at the Locked On College channel of the Locked On Podcast Network, and that is Sweat Block. So I've had sweat many times in my life. I can be at work, I can be working out outside or in the weight room. Or I should say the gym. My sister would probably be like, "Oh God, you said the weight room?" Yeah. Well, okay, I'll call it a gym for her. So it could happen anywhere. Heck, it happens to me when I'm watching a Bearcats game now. So take Pamela, because she would hide in the office bathroom every 30 minutes to dry off her armpits so no one would see the wet circles under her arms. She finally has her life back because of Sweat Block. She was able to fix her problem with Sweat Block, and I was too. Because Sweat Block gives you the confidence to wear what you want without embarrassing underarm sweat. The wipes were featured and tested on the Rachel Ray Show. Sweat Block wipes on the Rachel Ray Show by firefighters. If you or someone you love is experiencing sweat or odor, try Sweat Block. Save 20% with promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com. Also available on Amazon. All right, so as we continue here. Look, there's a lot of expectations surrounding this program. That's what happens when you're back-to-back conference champions and you make the college football playoff as a group of 5 team. By nature, what we do is we hold you to a higher standard, especially when you're the Cincinnati Bearcats and you play in the American Athletic Conference. It's like what we've done with the Bengals this year. Small market, hadn't won a playoff game in 31 years. They go to the Super Bowl. We expect them now to go back every year. 2 things with that, though. One, the Bengals probably aren't going to go back to the Super Bowl this year, and that's fine. Don't expect them to. Don't expect them to go every year just because they won last year and they have Joe Burrow. 2, expectations are a good thing. Once you do something and see something done from the team that you root for or the team that you cover as a fan like I do, because I am a fan of the Bearcats, I'm a graduate of the university. Once I see something done, I say, okay, this should happen at least once every maybe 4 years. The point is this. Expectations are fine. It's what makes sports fun. Can you live up to the hype that is being created? But they also can weigh on you a little bit. And I think for the first time, I think we're seeing this team start to maybe have the weight of expectations get to them a little bit. Ivan Pace has still played really well. Ben Bryant, though, is going through some growing pains. I think since the second half against Indiana, when the Bearcats went up 38-24, we all expected, you did, I did, the team did, that's how it was going to be every single game. The point of the matter is it's not. Okay? So your expectations for this team should not change. Even though I've said they're playing like an 8-4 team, your expectations shouldn't change because they can get it turned around. I would love for them to go into Orlando and get it turned around and walk out of there 45-31 win. And we're talking about, oh my gosh, this team has overcome its mistakes. Ben Bryant is now back as the firm QB1, and we're talking about a great victory next week. I would love for that to happen because there is a such thing as a midseason slump. The problem is when you have expectations of going to a New Year's Six Bowl or going to the college football playoff, the latter of which, sadly, is not going to happen this year. But the New Year's Six Bowl, right? The New Year's Six Bowl, that's attainable. But when you play in a group of 5 conference, you lose one game. New Year's Six is all of a sudden feels like how you had to attain getting to the playoff last year. If you're Alabama and you lose to LSU in 2 weeks, right, that probably knocks you out of the SEC championship game conversation. But it certainly keeps your New Year's Six Bowl hopes alive. You can lose 2 games in the SEC, the ACC, or wherever and still go to a New Year's Six Bowl. That's how this works. Right? Utah was either 11-2. I believe they were 11-2 last year. Lost 2 games, still went to the Rose Bowl. Bearcats had 2 losses in 2019. Thank goodness the American was strong then. But any other year, like when the Bearcats lost to UCF, excuse me, in 2018, they were 9-2. 9-2 in the American, yeah, that gets you to the Military Bowl, maybe. So the expectations and how you achieve them in this conference are very, very difficult. And maybe it's starting to get to them. Maybe it is. Because they saw how good they could be in the first half against Indiana, and they haven't attained it since. Right? They haven't scored 38 points in a game since Indiana. They scored 38 points against Miami and then 38 in the first half. And I don't know, quite frankly, if they will get to 38 again this season. I'd like to think they will. But when you are a program that's top 10, you're in a reloading year, there's enough talent and depth on this team. But you know what I think needs to happen? I think Luke Fickell needs to coach better. I revere Luke Fickell. A lot of you I know do as well. If you are a student, recent graduate, alum, donor, fan, etc., excuse me, you love Luke Fickell. There's no question about it of what he's done for this program. Justin's article, I'm reading comments from fans that they would take this easily over the 80s and 90s. Luke Fickell's won 54 games in less than 6 years. Rick Minter took 10 years to win 53. All right? 10 years to win 53. That's an average of 5 wins a season. 5.3 to be exact. That, my friends, is, yeah. You now know why you appreciate Luke Fickell. But he's got to coach better. He's got to understand what's being run right now on offense and what's being run right now defensively and the undisciplined penalties. The kicking game, I guess, is fine. Ryan Coe had a 5 of 6 day against SMU, but shouldn't have come to 5 of 6, excuse me. You've got to coach better. Use Evan Prater. You know, I feel like Luke Fickell is sometimes a little too by the book. You know what I mean by that? I feel like he's a little too by the book. And I don't know if it's because, you know, it's what he believes. But to me, when you have the luxury of Evan Prater in your backfield, you got to use him as much as you can. Have a package of plays. Go see Gino Guidugli Sunday night throughout the week or Sunday morning and say, hey, Gino, what package of plays do you have for Evan Prater? Because we're going to use him against UCF this week. I get it. They don't like to change quarterbacks in the game. But you know what? Sometimes you got to go by how the feel of the season is going. Right now, for as great as the Bearcats have looked at times, and for as much as they've won 6 straight games and haven't lost since Arkansas, which was the expectation, it's kind of felt a little uneven. It's kind of felt a little boring. So why not inject some life into your team, the fan base, by sending Evan Prater out for some plays in Central Florida? Catch them off guard. You got to understand situations. Last year, you had the luxury of Desmond Ridder and his running abilities and dual threat. But remember the point I made in the offseason. Luke Fickell's coaching this year will matter more than any other year that he has been in Cincinnati. Why? Because the talent is less than what it's been. So when the talent is less, you got to squeeze every bit out of it. Utilize every resource at your disposal. And right now, Luke Fickell is not using his best resourceable asset in Evan Prater. He's not. And it's coming to a point where it's costing his team in key situations. And at some point, it very well might cost the Bearcats a big game like Saturday or the conference championship game. And if you're Gino Guidugli, I get it. It's different calling plays without Ridder, Pearson, Ford. But that's where you got to get creative. This offense right now lacks creativity. And that against UCF is not a good thing to walk into. The Bearcats were able to get back into the game against UCF 2 years ago because of their creativity on offense. Desmond Ridder had 2 rushing touchdowns and 2 passing touchdowns in that game. Tell me that's not creativity. I shouldn't have said it like that. That's creativity. That's what I'm telling you. The Bearcats right now I get it, historically, they've been a ground and pound team, but they have no creativity right now to this offense. It's predictable. I've heard Mo Egger talk this week how hard the Bengals offense is to prepare for. That's what I want the Bearcats offense to be. We'll touch on that more throughout this week, but just something to think about. Tomorrow, as always, on Thursday, Russ Hellman, my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated, will join me to talk about the game Saturday against SMU. We'll talk about this game on Saturday against Central Florida. We'll get some hoops conversation going as well. Friday is my game preview, why Josh Wiley and Leonard Taylor matter so much to this game plan for me. And we take a look, and we'll just get into what is the biggest game of the season so far. Absolutely the biggest game of the season, and what it will mean going forward for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Game's at 3:30 on Saturday, so that means the recap show will be posted by 10 o'clock Saturday night, which I will be doing from the Lakeside Lodge at Clemson University. Love that hotel, love that university. So, and Mama Frankie will be with me, so she'll get to sit in on the post-game show, which she loves to do, and I love having her there too. So there you go. Anyway, thanks for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. How about for your second listen? Check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights on only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. As for me, you can follow me on Twitter at Frankie_90 with 2 N's and an ATI. You can follow me on Instagram, AlexFrank9_, email me at alex3frank@gmail.com. For Locked On Bearcats, my name is Alex Frank. Have a great, great, great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy, so you can keep making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. Back with Russ Hellman tomorrow, right here on Locked On Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.